I'm Corbett Wall with DV Auction, here with your feeder flash for Friday, February the 17th, brought to you in part by Taleve by Norbrook. I've got some unbreaking news. Taleve delivers the same fast and long-acting broad-spectrum activity you expect from a tulathromycin injection, but it's exclusively in plastic bottles, so you don't have to worry about it breaking. For more information, go to norbrook.com. Beyond 160, and much like we thought early this week when we got the roundup from last week and late Friday in, we found out how many cattle sold at 160, and even though our 5-area feeding region weighted average on steers did not reach 160, it was very, very close. But 160 was the market. Well, I told you guys, I figured once we knocked down that barrier, we would just go on, and we absolutely have. We've left 160 behind. We still haven't seen significant trade in the Southern Plains. We did see a little bit of trade on just a couple of loads in Kansas sell at 161. Well, that's left 160 behind. 160, one and a half traded in Nebraska. We saw some 162 in Iowa on Wednesday. And we just left that in the dust, guys. But supplies will continue to tighten, especially cow supplies, and that makes up part of your slaughter there. But and it counts for beef. But your cow numbers are going to get extremely tight, especially dairy cows. Now the dairy cows have been running heavy this winter, as some of your big dairies culling off dairy cows quite a bit, pretty easily, sending those to the beef pen. But as we start to warm up and we get into the springtime, those dairy cows are going to milk pretty good. They're not going to be culling as many of those dairy cows. And then we know that our beef cows have been whittled down to nearly nothing, and there's not going to be too many of those. A lot of your guys come in and preg check whenever they wean, and they've already moved a bulk of those cows out. Now some guys have stockpiled part of those beef cows. They are feeding some of those beef cows. Those cows will be coming back, but it's not going to be near enough. So we're going to be extremely tight for cow slaughter. They'll be trying to fill in some on the ground product that comes from the steers and heifers, but we're gaining a little bit of ground here now. And what we gain here now through the first 2 or 3 months here as we move into early spring, we get past April. Whatever we gain between now and then is gravy, because we are really going to gain it, guys, once we get into the early summer months and we start to see that early grilling demand, and we see that those retailers are going to come in and start filling their coffers for that. Then we got a chance to really gain some ground. But everything's looking up. We saw, like I said, we've seen these guys that sell negotiated cash start to learn how to negotiate again. There's not very many guys, especially in the Southern Plains. It would not take 2 hands to count everybody that sells negotiated in Kansas. It would not take 1 hand to count everybody that sells negotiated in Texas. I'm not sure if you guys realize that. So where's everybody gone? Well, most of the other guys that were doing that have taken the bait, and now they are selling to the packers, maybe not necessarily on a structured AMA, but they'll take the buck over the average, which ends up being put into mandatory price reporting as an AMA. And why do packers continue to buy cattle a buck over? To get people to stop negotiating, because they do not want competition, guys. So what's happened? We've got so few guys now selling negotiated in the Southern Plains. They're basically like the packers. It's easier for those guys to get their heads together. That's the problem that we've had with negotiated trade all this time, is because you've got 4 packers putting their heads together, and you had 400 cattle feeders that were all going one way and then the other. You still see that in the Northern Plains. Now we see that the Southern Plains is trading at a premium to what the Northern Plains is. Most of that is due to muddy conditions and the tag that's on the cattle. But the Northern Plains, you still got a lot of people that are involved in the negotiations each week, especially in Iowa, because we have farmer feeders, and they do not get together. I mean, you got one guy that's plumb sick of his cattle. He's got some new feeders ordered that he would rather put in that pen. His pens are muddy. He'd like to go in there and scrape them. He's going to sell those cattle. And once he sells those cattle, it works on establishing a market. Different people up there are selling cattle for different reasons. In the Southern Plains, these guys are getting together. A lot of the guys that sell in the cash market are using consolidated beef producers. They know how to dig their heels in, and they're demanding more for the cattle. But it got cold and snowy here late in the week, and I think we've gotten to the point now where the market is going to love a cold and snowy week, and I think we're going to gain some more ground. I would be surprised if the Southern Plains gives in for less than 162. It may happen Friday night at midnight, but I think they'll probably do that. But thank goodness for global warming. Can you imagine how cold and miserable the winter would have been up in the Midwest and the Northern Plains if we had not had the global warming that we've experienced over the last several weeks? Let's talk about your board for Thursday. February live cattle futures up 22 cents at 162.77, continuing to gain ground, guys. Nearly 163 on your spot live cattle contract, and we have not seen it trade that way. We will see it here before that contract expires, and it's getting close. It's only got maybe a week's worth of business days to trade. April down 52 cents at 164.07. Your back month's down 30 cents to down 47. March feeder cattle down $1.10 at 186.22, basically because it's been up earlier in the week. April down 55 at 190.60. Your back months were down 40 cents to down 75. March corn down just a quarter-cent a bushel at 6.76. March beans up 3/4 cent a bushel at 15.26 and a half. Talk about your fat cattle trade. We still have not seen much trade happen at all. I'll tell you what we've seen. Of course, we don't get to see what happens in Colorado because there's not enough activity there to get through confidentiality filters. Iowa sold 700 head on Thursday, only 8,700 for the week. So we're going to see some active trade on Friday in Iowa, but they did have a huge week last week, over 30,000, so it's not going to be as big as we would typically hope for in Iowa. But one live price, $160. Dress price jumped a bunch. It jumps $2 to $4 more than what we had tops last week, ranging from $254 to $256, finally starting to catch up with the higher cash market. Nebraska, 3,200 head confirmed sold on Thursday, only 7,100 for the week. They've got a lot of work to do. Live sales from 159 to 161 and a half. I think that 159 was on some tagged up cattle. 256 was the only dress price they had in Nebraska. That's going to be your price, guys. Like I said, Kansas had a couple loads, about 100 head there, and they sold at 161. It was a load of steers and then a load of mixed bag steers. So that's not your established market. That's another reason I think it's going to be 162. But that's all they've sold in Kansas so far this week. Texas has not traded a hoof, and they're due for a big week in the Southern Plains. If we get to 162, I assume we'll have a big movement there. Box beef cutout values up again. Choice boxes have gained $10 in the last week. Choice cuts $279.55 up $3.88. Selects up $1.45 at $262.64, up $8.50 since the same time last week. Talk about your slaughter. 499,000 through the first 4 days of the week. That's 5,000 more than last week, 4,000 more than the same week a year ago. Your actual slaughter information come back for the week ending February the 4th. Had your average dressed steer carcass weight at 908 pounds. That's 2 pounds less than the previous report. 22 pounds less than the same report a year ago. If you think these weights aren't getting lighter. Talk about what else is going on. Limousine and Limflex are focusing on feed efficiency, improved marbling, superior yield grade, which they've always had, calving ease. Let Limousine and Limflex take you full circle. Go to NALF.org. Talk about your feeder cattle market, your real-time index on DV auction late in the day on Thursday. Based on an 800-pound steer up through the middle 12 states, cash auction price 183.06, down just 4 cents from the end of Wednesday's trade, but basically steady. You think the real-time index is not a good precursor for your cash CME feeder cattle index? Now that things have kind of leveled out here for a day or two and CME cash feeder cattle index is caught up, what is it? Exactly the same figure, 183.06. If you guys like this report and you'd like to see it more often, you have trouble finding it, text the word FLASH to 209 Corbett or 209-267-2488, and it'll be texted to you every morning, guys. You can just hit the button and watch it. You won't have to search for this report. Let's talk about your big sales on Thursday. Both Winter Livestock at Pratt and Farmers and Ranchers Livestock in Salina, Kansas had lighter receipts with weather moving through Kansas there, and not a very good test of the market, but where they were tested, they were steady to higher, as much as $5 higher. Let's talk about a market that did have a big run. How about Mitchell Livestock Marketing in Mitchell, South Dakota? DV auction customer there, 5,100 head, and it was their Hereford Influence Special, and 5,100 head there. Pretty good run for a Hereford Special. And in the market, compared to the typical sale they had last week, which would have been predominantly black, your market on feeder steers weighing over 700 pounds were steadied at $2 higher, spots $5 higher. That's kudos for you guys that are feeding for the Hereford program there. Now some of your lighter weight stockers and things like that were some lower there, but not as well tested. Let's talk about your Zoetis stick-out sale of the day. It was Ogallala Livestock Auction in Ogallala, Nebraska. 5,800 head on offer. Look at this automated marker report from Cattle Market Central. Look at your best tested weights. 645 head of 5-weight steer calves in Ogallala, average 559 pounds, with a weighted average price on nearly 650 of them of $235.31. 946 head of 6-weight steer calves in Ogallala, average 656 pounds, weighted average price $209.21, guys. We haven't seen this. 878 head of 7-weight steer calves, average 751 pounds, with a weighted average price of $186.23. Look at some of the heifers, and a lot of heifers. 592 head 5-weight heifer calves, average 563, weighted average price $201.63. 562 head of your 6-weight heifers, average 646, with a weighted average price of $188.43, with help from one large string 50 head of replacement heifers that sold for replacement, 688 pounds, $193.75. But 514 head of your 7-weight heifers, average 741, weighted average price on those $176.65. Give you a few individual quotes from all around the area. How about Stockman's Livestock Exchange? Logan Beam sold his from Beulah, North Dakota. He was proud of it, sent me a message on them. 70 head, 745 pound steers, bring $199.50, weighing nearly 7.5, guys. That's in Dickinson, North Dakota. How about Farmers and Ranchers Livestock in Salina? I told you they had a lighter run, but still had some load lots. 60 head, 862 pound steers, bring $186.75. But the best quote that I saw anywhere on Thursday in your Macrocin, no BS top quote for the day, come out of Ogallala Livestock Auction, was 57 steer calves, weighed 501, bring $2.59 a pound. And that's your feeder flash for Friday.